Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to feel better and breathe easier, then do we have the Pain Nation show for you. Today I'll be talking with Clea Irwin, founder of Irwin Naturals, CEO and chief scientist for 15 years, the founder and director of Quantum Gravity Research, and the author of a much-needed book on the truth about CBD, Pain Nation. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about being sick, stressed, and all effed up, and whether CBD is the cure. That, plus we'll talk about shellfish and Prozac, CBD and consciousness, une maladie du petit pépère, and what in the world a vomit comet has to do with anything. So welcome to the show, Clea. Are you ready to shine?
Yes, exciting to be here. Thanks, Michael.
So excited to have you here. Before we dive into all things CBD, do you mind telling us where you grew up and what life was like?
Yeah, I grew up in Los Angeles, single mother with some mental disabilities, and grew up very poor. So we grew up in a very small space, a converted motel room, and had this interesting life of being in poverty, but not caring because I hadn't learned yet that money was important, and we were happy, and our household was full of a lot of creativity, so it helped build my creative muscles as a child.
Oftentimes when somebody grows up in a lot of poverty, there is a fire in their belly to make sure that does not take place for their kids. I'm guessing mom said education very important. You probably got a good education. How did you spend 20 years on trying to become financially independent?
So actually, so we grew up. My mother didn't really focus on education.
Yeah.
We focused in our house on creativity and language,
Cool.
and art.
Yeah.
And so then, because we were in a school district that was very high end, so we grew up, for example, with children living in 5,000 square foot homes, and we had a 300 square foot space. And so I was ashamed of that as a child because little kids can be mean. And so there was always this desire to get money because of the insecurity from, if I would have been a poor kid growing up in a poor neighborhood,
Yeah.
it would have been perhaps different. I think, though, that looking back on my life and viewing everything as a synchronicity, that the reason my circumstances were the way they were is because I needed to get a lot of money to do the mission that I would become aware of later in life, which is to discover the first principles unification of spirit and matter.
Well, it's actually, let's jump through the whole story. Now, you founded one of the nation's largest nutraceutical companies. But if we go to that word synchronicity, it's interesting. We're going to talk about CBD oil today. When we talk about plant medicine, it is fascinating that we generate or create many of the same chemicals in our body that the plants do. The plants grow one place. We, in theory, grow another place. We have the same connection or synchronicity. What's going on?
Well, in the 1980s, there was a massive system in the body that had evaded detection for a long time. It's surprising, actually. And it's called the endocannabinoid system, similar to the immune system insofar as it being ubiquitously distributed throughout the body. And what it does is it is the body's master harmonizer or balancer. And in the medical community, a disease is defined as two or more systems of the body that are so severely out of sync within a system itself or between two systems that it remains for a prolonged period of time and the system ceases to function optimally.
Yeah.
And those lack of functions or malfunctions are the disease signatures that will get you labeled as having this or that mental or physical disease. So this endocannabinoid system, like the immune system, goes into action when there is something wrong. The endocannabinoid system goes into action when two or more systems are out of balance. They're not talking to each other properly. And then your body produces these cannabinoids, which is a type of molecule. And the cannabinoids act as keys that fit into little keyholes called the cannabinoid receptors. And then the endocannabinoid receptors go into action to synchronize or harmonize the out of balance systems in your body. So it's kind of like the pancreas. It goes into action when you have a lot of sugar in your blood, and otherwise it's quiet.
So I want to back up from there. I want to talk about these systems. I'm not sure if you retired, but you ended up shifting in 2008. If I have these timelines right, you ended up shifting to focusing on consciousness. Actually, there was a jet flight involved, wasn't there?
A jet flight?
A jet flight with Kesley? Do I have that right? Your daughter?
Oh, yeah. I had my daughter, it was her 10th birthday, and took her on a flight that does parabolas. That's when the plane goes up and down. And if you adjust those parabolas on a jet just right, you can experience 30 full seconds of pure weightlessness, same as being in outer space.
Yeah.
So it did that 15 times, and we were floating around and putting globs of water, like shimmering spheres, in the air, and it was amazing. It was a hollowed out fuselage of a commercial airliner. So then the co-founder of that company, called Zero G Flights, is Peter Diamandis, and he asked if I could do some pro bono business consulting for his nonprofit, which is called the X Prize Foundation. And then I did that, and then he suggested I read a book that was impactful for him, which was called The Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil, which is this book about how exponentially increasing technology will get to a point where it so rapidly starts increasing that the world is unimaginably different in a shockingly short period of time. So then I started thinking, so then Peter invited me to this meeting of about 35 people, including one of the founders of Google and the head of NASA's Ames Research Center. So we all met at NASA's Ames Center in Palo Alto, and we were talking about starting this organization called Singularity University that would synthesize technologies that are riding the exponential expansion of computational power, which is things like genetics, strong AI, robotics, and to use the synthesis of those technologies to tackle the grand challenges of humanity, which are the challenges that would impact 1 billion or more people if resolved, like clean energy would be an example.
Moonshots.
But moonshots that have just tremendous social good impact. And so I really caught the philanthropy bug at that meeting and came back to Los Angeles thinking about how I can do something really big that helps people. And so I wanted to focus on energy. And so I started focusing on the physics of photovoltaic technology, solar cell energy. And that got me down a rabbit hole that led to fundamental physics. So the story of fundamental physics is that scientists are still trying to figure out what this place really is, reality. And it's a bit of a head scratcher because we have these two theories that tell us a lot in certain regimes. So we have the theory of space and time, which is Einstein's general relativity. And then we have the theory of quantum mechanics, which is virtually everything else, right? From chemistry and particle interactions. But the problem is each theory implies that the other is incorrect. They violently disagree. So the holy grail of all of science is to understand the unification theory that's generally called quantum gravity. So you take space-time theory, gravity, and everything else, quantum mechanics, and that would be quantum gravity. So there is no quantum gravity theory that works yet. String theory is an attempt. It's 50 years old, and it has never made a single successful prediction. If humanity were to discover the theory of everything, it would usher in Star Trek level technology 300 years early. And of course, Star Trek level technology is physical health that can always be repaired, like you're free of disease. Star Trek technology is free of money, right? In the TV show Star Trek, money was obsolete because you could print a Rolex watch or you could transmute gold, from other elements. And so anyway, the rabbit hole was interesting that I went down. So I quit my job as a businessman of Irwin Naturals, and I was a materialist, atheist. So that was the best I could do with the knowledge I had. It was a deductive position.
Okay, I got to stop you right there. There was a past tense. I was a materialist, atheist, What's happened?
Yeah. So what happened is as I went down into the fundamental physics questions, right? What is energy? What is a photon? How do photons and electrons interact, right? You're going deep into this very technical approach to unification physics. What started popping out deductively, logically, was that mysteriously consciousness plays an enigmatic but profound role in the behavior of physical reality. And it's even has a name. It's called the measurement problem. It comes from the idea of a double slit experiment, that when you're aware of the data from a double slit experiment, then it behaves one way physically. And when you're not aware, it behaves another way.
Schrodinger's cat.
Yes. And so this is very bizarre, and nobody's ever been able to solve it, but it's incontrovertible. Physicists generally agree that there's a spooky connection between consciousness, at least human consciousness, right? Because they've never been able to test the double slit experiment with the awareness of a cat being aware of the data, right? So as I went deeper and deeper into that, I started discovering literature, peer-reviewed literature, that phenomena exist in nature that general relativity and quantum mechanics or no other good theory explain. For example, my 9-year-old son was able to see and be aware of things that he wasn't measuring by getting light in his eyes or sound in his ears.
Example?
He told me, he asked me if I could teach him how to meditate. So I taught him how to meditate. He's 9, right? So he's just a little kid, right? So I teach him how to meditate, and then he freestyles and does his own thing. And then he tells me that he can leave his body and float around like a ghost. And I didn't believe, right? I didn't believe it because I'm a materialist atheist at the time, right? So then I start testing my 9-year-old, because maybe, just on a lark, So I go into this other room in the house, and I'm going to do something random and then go back 3 rooms away and ask my son, okay, what did I do? So I go in there and I find in the bathroom a big basket of old markers and pens, like 100 of them. And I randomly pick one and I put it on the left side of the sink, and I go back and I say, all right, kid, what did I do? And he closes his eyes, opens them 2 seconds later and says, oh, you put a red marker on the upper left side of the sink. And of course, I did it again and again and again. And then
Oh my.
yeah. So then I found I could do these types of things. Then I started finding peer review literature that it's been studied even at universities. And then I started thinking, oh my gosh, I've been a sheep. I went with the status quo, with the herd, and I presumed that this stuff is fake because that's what they say, right? That I never actually looked for research. I never tried to do experiments myself or question people, or I just went with the crowd, and that was my mistake. So then I said, all right, so if this so Haley did that. My son's name's Haley.
Yeah.
He did that with his consciousness. He took his, and I asked, I say, Haley, I'd like to do that myself. How did you do that? And he says, oh, well, I just close my eyes, like you said, and I'm trying to meditate, and I close my eyes, and then I imagine myself over my head looking at myself, closing my eyes and meditating. And he looks me straight in the eye and says, but it's not real. I'm just imagining it. And then he paused for effect, and he says, but then it clicks and it becomes real. And once I feel it click and it becomes real, then I can maneuver myself. Well, it's not his body physically, but he says I can maneuver he didn't use the word consciousness, but he just said, then I can kind of just move around. And I just went right into the room where you went, and I saw the red marker. So at that point, I had to reinvent my physical viewpoint, and I had to say, all right, so there's the theory of space and time, explains a lot of stuff. Yeah. There's a theory of quantum mechanics, explains a lot of stuff. The two theories imply that one another are incorrect, and there's this other fact of reality that humans appear to be able to have access to what we would call non-local information. Yeah. Information from the future, from the past, from a different place in space, and can even manipulate matter with their minds, because Haley also demonstrated that to me. And
I've got to ask one more time, and we'll get down the CBD rabbit hole in a minute, but how did he manipulate matter?
So after testing him with a dozen tests like the red marker thing and becoming convinced that now I have to believe that that consciousness can move around and kind of like astral project, if you will, now I wanted to do it. So at this point, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm freestyling. I'm off balance. Yeah. So I say to my kid, probably because I remembered Peter Pan and how they would pull out of their shadow, and they had the shadow bodies, and then they could fly and whatnot. So I said, I just made this up. I said, all right, here's what I want you to do. I want you to float your little body above my head, and I'm going to reach out my imaginary energetic arm, my right arm. I'm going to be reaching it up to you, and I need you to pull me out of my body so I can float around with you. So he says, no prob. And we close our eyes. Yeah. And these are short moments of meditation. We close our eyes for like 30 seconds. And during that 30 seconds, I'm straining to reach up my imaginary energetic right arm and expecting him to pull me out of my body so I could do what he did. And then I had this experience during the 30 seconds, which seemed weird. I felt a pulse under my right armpit, like somebody palpating you with just a kind of a poke. Yep. And then I saw like a white light there, like when you touch your eyeball and you can kind of see a light, but it was positioned here. I just figured it was a nerve twitch, or I don't know. Just I didn't put much on it. I wasn't going to talk about it, but anyway, then I woke up and I opened my eyes, and then I playfully blamed him. I said, you didn't pull me out of my body. I blamed it on him, right? And he says, but Daddy, I tried, but you were too heavy. So then I thought of something else, and I grabbed you under your right armpit and I tried to yank you up, but you were still too heavy. So at that point I said, well, that can't be a coincidence. that now is telekinesis. So now with his consciousness, he has influenced matter in my armpit. And so there was that. And so that sent me down a whole new objective. Instead of trying to unify just the ideas of quantum mechanics and general relativity, whatever this new unifying framework is that would lead to new technologies and a better understanding of reality, it better explain all of reality. And part of reality now, in my new viewpoint, is that consciousness somehow is integral to everything, and we've come to understand that everything is literally made of consciousness, and we are subsystems or subconsciousnesses within this universal consciousness, and the universal consciousness itself works in a code or a language that you could think of as sacred geometry if you like the word sacred, or you could just call it geometry. But it's a geometric language, and it's made of thought.
Beautiful. I want to go from there, and this is an amazing topic that we could blow out under interview after interview. This is the stuff I love because it's everything. It is the everything. We are, like you say, a subpart of the everything. Right. Bringing it to CBD oil. Let's dive into CBD oil here, because if you mentioned sacred geometry, I want to talk about a sacred plant, and we can even talk a little bit about plant wisdom and consciousness, because to me, as we were talking about briefly earlier, it is no accident that the plant has the same things that we need. We produce the same things that the plant produces, and the plant wisdom can help heal us. What is CBD oil? What's going on?
So I ignored my company for most of the last 10 years, focusing and working with my team of physicists. But about 2 years ago, CBD caught my attention. And my purpose of doing the physics mission is to raise consciousness. And you might say, but why do you want to raise consciousness? And I want to raise consciousness so people can have more fun and treat one another with more respect. That's it, right? And for me, and for a lot of people, one of the fun things about existing is learning. And another fun thing is creating. So if we can be free of the rat race and all of the funky beliefs, we would go to our childhood innate built-in desires, create stuff, learn stuff. You know, you learn other stuff that people created, so they'll never stop creating, so you never have a lack of things to learn. And that's fun. And treating everybody with love and respect is the way to go. And so the way for me to get the planet, or to do my part to help get all of us to be in that state, is through this deep, deep question, which is, well, what the hell is this place, right? The question of Neo in the Matrix. What is reality? And we even made a film on it on YouTube called What is Reality? And so in any event, why would I get distracted from that by a plant medicine? Because I had spent the first 15 years building Irwin Naturals, selling plant medicine. And I quit that. I still own the company, but I quit that and didn't have any involvement really for 10 years. So what could possibly distract me in the last 2 years for CBD? So I've been selling these herbal products since my 20s, and I've seen a lot of amazing plant medicines, and they help people. But CBD is different. I've never seen anything like CBD. CBD treats over 20,000 different disease conditions. CBD doesn't act directly on any disease condition. It acts directly on the endocannabinoid system that balances the systems in your body, and that's why it treats so many different things. But one of the things that I started thinking about in the last 2 years is socio-political stuff, right? Because I look around and I was really surprised that we elected Trump, because I thought we were becoming a more progressive nation. You know, we have historically been very racist, and I was proud of our country for having so many white voters put a black president in office. And I just really didn't see that coming. The guy from the TV show is our president, but I thought he was more like a cartoon character, you know, of excessive right wing. And I just didn't see it coming. And so there's an undertone of fear going on in the world. And that allowed Trump to campaign on a platform of fear. You know, the Mexicans are going to get us, they're going to get our jobs, the Chinese are going to take our place at the throne of the most powerful nation on earth. There are, you know, we got to be afraid of them. We got to be afraid of anything and anybody that they can come up with. And that fear puts a subconscious load in the minds and bodies of the American populace, and it causes the immune system to be depressed. It causes the inflammatory system to be hyper, nervous, you know, and we have the highest rate of opioid from prescription drugs. And the most remarkable statistic, I think, in the book is that America is a mere 4.5% of the world's population. And every country on the planet prescribes prescription opioids, amphetamines, antidepressants. And we, 4.5% of the population, single-handedly consume 75% of the world's manufactured prescription drugs. And we're not that much sicker than the rest of the world. So it means that we're writing prescriptions too willy-nilly for drugs. Mm-hmm. And we're also probably a little sicker. After all, we do have the highest rate of childhood diabetes. We have the highest rate of many diseases. So there's something wrong. And so CBD, I mean, you don't like to, in my business, you don't like to call anything a miracle cure, right? But if there was anything I've ever come across that you could label as a miracle plant medicine, it would be CBD. And how it impacts consciousness, like how it impacted my consciousness, is profound. CBD is like meditation in a pill. It increases the ratio of your alpha and theta brainwaves relative to beta, which is what meditation does, or playing with puppies, or taking a walk in the park does, or breathing deep and slow. This will increase your theta and alpha. But CBD does this, and so we're finding the testimonials from people using it are just unbelievable. I take 40 milligrams a day.
And I'm appreciative that you said how much you take, as I've got my little CBD oil right here, and nice. I'm like, I've never known exactly how much you take, played around with the dosing. It is such a powerful substance, and I believe in plant wisdom. I believe that it is here to help us. I have recommended it. I'm not a doctor, don't play one on TV, but I've recommended that people look into it when I'm coaching them, when I'm working with groups. I say either it is the greatest snake oil in the world, or there is something really to it. Until I read this book, I must apologize, Clee. I didn't know the amount of literature going back over 30 years on CBD oil. What can you tell us about the research being done? And I'm saying 30 years because there's an Israeli scientist who's been working on this for a very, very long time.
Yes, so Raphael Mechoulam at the Technion University in Israel, where he is a professor, he isolated one of the cannabinoids, the one that gets you high, THC.
Yeah.
And then his work led to the discovery of CBD, another cannabinoid in the plant that does not get you high. And that led directly to the discovery of this ubiquitous system, the endocannabinoid system. So the problem, probably stemming from racism, is that in America, it has been illegal for university researchers to study this plant. Mm-hmm. So it was a catch-22. So we couldn't develop enough.
Why do you say racism?
Well, it's been well known since the turn of the last century that people of color in this country had used this plant for medicinal and recreational purposes. Mm-hmm. So let's put CBD to the side and talk about getting high.
Yeah.
So since our country was founded, and of course it was run by wealthy white men, right? And their drug of choice to get high is alcohol, right? Have not respectable, right? Have a couple bourbons with your friend in the evening. Have a few glasses of wine at dinner with your wife. Nothing wrong with getting high on alcohol. Of course, we label it with a different word, like getting tipsy or drunk, or buzzed. But it's the same thing. It's altering your consciousness. And people like to alter their consciousness. Children naturally like to spin, and they discovered by spinning they can alter their consciousness and feel that euphoric, dizzy feeling. And sometimes if people use the altering their consciousness as a band-aid to cover over other pains that they're not facing, that's a bad thing. But it's not a bad thing necessarily to alter your consciousness as long as it's not hurting you. Or as long as it's not as a cheap Band-Aid to cover over something else.
Yeah.
And so a glass of wine at dinner won't really hurt you. So anyway, so that was fine. So we go into the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s. And in the 1930s, they started deciding, well, that plant that the poor people, the brown people, and the black people were using because they couldn't afford the white man's drug of choice, alcohol, then we kind of don't like that because it's them, and so we'll put a tax disincentive on it to make it difficult for an industry to grow hemp. It wasn't illegal. So it trucked along. We went into the 1960s, and it was still not illegal to have marijuana. And then all hell broke loose. The children of the white elite started going to universities, and they left home. And they decided that they were not going to get stoned in college, a lot of them, on alcohol, because that was their dad's drug of choice, right? And they wanted to be rebellious, right? They wanted to kind of break free, do something different. So they picked up on the people of color's drug of choice, this plant, and they started altering their consciousness by smoking marijuana. And that was it. Within a few years, the Controlled Substances Act of 1970 was enacted, and it made that plant as deadly illegal as heroin. People served long jail sentences just for using it to treat their pain or to get high with for recreational purposes. There was never a case of death from marijuana. It has no LD50, which is the 1/2 of the quantity of some substance that will kill you. Alcohol has an LD50. There is no disease condition that is associated with it. Alcohol, liver cirrhosis, and on and on. There's no addictive mechanism. That is a chemical pathway that's a technical addiction chemical mechanism. There is no, it's like potatoes. You can't get addicted to potatoes. But you can get addicted to nicotine and alcohol or heroin, not cannabis. So there was really no scientific or logical societal reason to put it on the Schedule 1 list.
The top of the top for dangerous.
Oh my God. Yeah. It was, I mean, if you look at all the ones that are in Schedule 2 and 3, you say, man, those are real dangerous too. And you just wouldn't understand the logic of it. So it all comes from a witch hunt concept of racism and themism, the same kind of themism that we're seeing today from the extreme right, where they're always got a finger to blame or point to someone else. So when alcohol was made illegal for 8 years, the country came to their senses. Now, that again is a substance that was killing people. Marijuana has never caused a barroom fight. Alcohol causes barroom fights, right?
Yeah.
Alcohol severely impairs your motor response time and you get into car accidents. Not so much with marijuana. And so, but that was 8 years. And even though it's harmful, it's not the job of the government to play our father and tell us that we can't have wine at dinner, right? Or beer. And so people came to their senses after 8 years. Unfortunately, it gave birth to a violent crime industry that's still with us today. But they came to their senses. Well, my goodness, it's since 1970, right? So it's been about 50 years, and we've almost come to our senses. You'll see marijuana become federally legal soon. Colorado, California, other states are leading the way, but it never should have been illegal in the first place. And anybody can make an argument, oh, people shouldn't get high. Fine, people shouldn't get high. That's what the women's suffrage movement said about alcohol. But it's not the job of government to be our parents to that extent.
Yeah. So let's go from there. Let's talk about some of the research with CBD oil. Maybe we can go to Dr. Michael Masterman Smith. What did he find with CBD and cancer cells?
Well, two things. So it turns out that there's evidence, clinical evidence, that cannabinoids like CBD prevent cancer from developing in the first place. There's other evidence and other studies that show that it can cure cancer. That is, it can shrink a tumor and continue shrinking it until it's no longer observable and until the point where the patient is no longer diagnosed with cancer in the first place. It's quite remarkable. There's no known pharmaceutical drug that has those qualities.
And he started to find this connection that there was actually a receptor site, which is the system that we're talking about, that would take these in. It's interesting. So he did, I don't know how many studies were done on this. What I'm trying to get at is how much was this studied and why was the study stopped at a certain level, and why aren't we able to move past that with cancer research and CBD oil?
We are moving past it. And there are 20,000 peer-reviewed studies that have amassed so far in the literature on how cannabinoids help with myriad disease conditions. And now the research is exploding. There's even a pharmaceutical company that has released a drug approved by the FDA that uses CBD to treat forms of childhood epilepsy. And there's all other drug companies are working on other uses of different cannabinoids. There's some combinations of cannabinoids that will attack pancreatic cancer, and then another combination that will attack breast cancer cells. And so we're only now scratching the surface of the plethora of disease conditions that these different combinations of cannabinoids can treat.
Thank you. Let's talk about CBD oil and epilepsy for a minute. You mentioned in your book C.J. Harris, high school football player. What was going on with him, and what can CBD oil do for seizures?
Well, so he was experiencing seizures and tried the drug therapies, and nothing was working. And then went on the internet and started finding websites talking about how it helped with seizures, and he tried it and it worked, and it's really just quite remarkable. The seizure and epilepsy thing is one of the icebreakers. It was one of the ones that was a really good example to get people to open their eyes in the medical community and maybe break free of the delusion or the hypnosis of the Nancy Reagan, just say no, all drugs, no matter what, are bad if they're from plants. I mean, it was almost like Nancy Reagan was saying, if it's a medicine from a plant, it's evil, like as in a sin. Yeah. And if it's synthesized with chemicals from a pharma company, it's not evil. It just was scientifically ridiculous. So anyway, so the nice thing about that is in the case of the epilepsy, a lot of pharmaceutical drugs treat things, right? But in some disease conditions, there's almost no halfway decent pharmaceutical alternative, and that is the case with a lot of these forms of childhood epilepsy and adult onset epilepsy. And so, in any event, that was a perfect case study where the cannabis plant could come in with its magical molecules and say, great, you guys have been trying with the pharmaceutical drugs, nothing's working, try me. And it worked, and it was profound. Statistically, it's incontrovertible. The effects are not subtle or trivial. And so that opened up the conversation.
I love it. And even a drop on the tongue from what you described as somebody's having a seizure could literally make a difference.
That's right.
So let's go from there, and let's talk about another one where as you're saying, this magic chemical, and I'm sure you really say magic in quotes, it's amazing though, can have a profound impact where pharmaceuticals are so challenged: depression, stress, and anxiety.
Well, as we said earlier, the endocannabinoid system brings systems into balance. So every system is itself a system of subsystems. So if you take the brain, it's a system of subsystems. So if your brain is malfunctioning and you have PTSD, you have OCD, right? You have depression. These malfunctions in consciousness in the brain are very susceptible to excellent results with CBD, because CBD will get the brain out of a state of its loops of dissonance. Think about music theory, where we have the idea of two chords being dissonant or resonant. And so every system in your body, the systems in your brain, they vibrate at different frequencies, like different guitar strings. Yeah. And how they speak to each other chemically and electromagnetically and with fluid flows can really be mathematically modeled as states of resonance or dissonance. And so CBD, because of how the endocannabinoid system is essentially the orchestrator getting the violin section to stay in resonance, right, with the winds section, the malfunctions of a myriad host of malfunctions in the brain can be coaxed back into resonance or harmony and talking to each other properly. The one I like, though, I have a little ADD style of brain. I define ADD as difficulty paying attention to that which bores you.
I like it.
So
you
for me,
and me both.
Right? So for me as a businessman, a 32-page legal contract bores me. And so for me, with this ADD brain type, it's a grind to get through it. Like, I want to think about something more interesting and I'll have to bring my brain back. But when I take CBD, it seems to treat that ADD tendency, and I can smoothly get through the 32-page contract with no problem, because it boosts up my alpha brain waves. And alpha brain waves are associated with mindful calmness, which is a better form of intelligence, because when you're in that mindful state, you're less reactionary, you're more strategic, and you will even score higher on standardized creative intelligence tests when your alpha brain waves are higher. So you could say that CBD in how it increases alpha brain waves will make you smarter, where you measure intelligence as creative intelligence, like synthesizing two or more ideas to come up with a solution.
And how has it been shown to help with people? I have dear friends, colleagues who use it for depression. How has it been shown to help with depression?
It's one of the sweet spots of profound impact, just like the epilepsy. You saw some stories about depression in the book. There's also a documentary that I was interviewed in, and they took the name because they liked our book, Pain Nation. And in there, we show Samora, who had been taking Wellbutrin and a dozen other pharmaceuticals and not having good results, having side effects that she didn't like. And now she only takes CBD, and she's self-confident, she's optimistic, she doesn't suffer from the depression anymore.
Woohoo! Tell me about, well, we were talking about Pain Nation off air beforehand, and I was saying that my wife and I have experienced a couple miscarriages. She has experienced them. I've been along for the ride. And we had been researching, trying to find information on the web, and Google is an interesting search device. It reinforces whatever a belief system is. And we weren't able to move past that to find CBD oil and any research on pregnancy. And so everybody, even very spiritual, if that's the word, midwives, very out of the box midwives were saying, no, there's nothing that says, it's probably not dangerous, but there's nothing that says it's safe for pregnancy yet.
Well, a CBD midwife is not likely to have been exposed to the full breadth of the scientific peer-reviewed literature because medical doctors in America have not been exposed to the literature. It's sort of like me when I was telling you that in the past, when I was a materialist atheist person, I was just repeating a story that I had heard from other people because that's what they say, and I didn't do the critical thinking and do my own homework.
So what is the literature? So you talk about Pain Nation. I think you even mentioned that CBD oil is naturally produced in breast milk for babies.
Yes. So the let's maybe drill into that. So
Thank you.
It's not CBD that is produced by the human body. So there's a word called cannabinoid, and cannabinoids are a group of molecules. They have a certain chemical geometry and structure. And those cannabinoids act on the endocannabinoid receptors in our body. So your body is producing cannabinoids for itself. And you need supplemental cannabinoids if you have any stress. That is, if you watch Game of Thrones, which gives you stress, if you're, if you're always on your iPhone, if you're not living a sort of genetically engineered life, which is relaxation most of the time. So basically, if you're a modern person, you may need supplemental cannabinoids because you're overtaxing your body's ability to produce cannabinoids. So luckily, some plants produce cannabinoids, and the cannabinoids have different names. There are 100 different cannabinoids, and there are many different cannabinoid receptors. So, for example, your body would produce a cannabinoid called cannabinoid X that's built for receptor X in your endocannabinoid receptors. And then the plant, the cannabis plant, produces 100 different cannabinoids. And so some of them act on this or that endocannabinoid receptor. So the CBD cannabinoid, which is from cannabis, acts on one of the most important endocannabinoid receptors in the body. So they're really analogs of one another. Yeah. So you have this molecule that chemically, to a chemist, he would look at the one CBD from the plant and say, well, that's basically the same chemical structure as this cannabinoid that your body produces, which we call endocannabinoids because you make them inside your body. But for the cannabis plant, those cannabinoids are endocannabinoids to itself, right? So yes, so breast milk has been found in one clinical study to contain cannabinoids, so which this implies that the developing infant needs cannabinoids that are supplemental, that are not just endogenously produced in the baby's body. So that's very interesting. because otherwise breast milk wouldn't need to generate that to be given exogenously to the infant.
Fascinating. As a layperson, if I'm looking at for our next pregnancy about trying to find out about CBD oil and should she take it, should she not, anything of that sort, where does a layperson go to learn more about that?
I would agree with part of what the midwife said to you guys,
Yeah.
which is that because of the demonization of this plant in America, and then unfortunately many other countries followed our lead, and they said, well, if America thinks it should be illegal, then we do too, right? So it's a worldwide craziness where they're making decisions that are not logical or based on scientific evidence. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, there is an unfortunate lack of science supporting. I said that there are a lot of clinical studies, and there are, but they're not enough because there are, tens of thousands of disease conditions. And so for clinical studies on pregnant women, there probably is no clinical study that shows that because it's been illegal. So the researchers haven't been able to study it. However, I can offer some logic to just put into your thinking hat. You should pay attention to the difference between a substance that your body makes versus one it doesn't. So your body doesn't make heroin, or your body doesn't make, amphetamines. There's a lot of drugs we take that your body doesn't produce. If it's a substance or a molecule that your body does produce, well, then you already know that through the millions of years of evolution, the mammal has been built to get along with that chemical, right? And so the molecule CBD and cannabinoids in general is clearly a molecule that your body already uses. It's part of your system. And so that's a little bit different than the question of, oh, we've synthesized this completely new molecule, this pharmaceutical drug, and now we want to know, would it get along with your body? Would it integrate well? So for a pregnant woman to question whether she should supplement, like there have been no clinical studies on whether vitamin C is helpful or harmful for a pregnant woman. But nobody would really question that because they would say, well, your body needs vitamin C. And so I'm sure I can take vitamin C, right? And so because your body definitely needs cannabinoids, and because most pregnant women are stressed because they're in a modern stress-filled society, that means they have a depleted levels of CBD. One interesting fact is the World Trade Center attack caused a lot of PTSD for people that were physically present and witnessed and experienced the event. And there was a good-sized medical study on people. So they took some quantity of people who were exposed to the trauma, and they separated them into two groups. The group that had PTSD, that were suffering from PTSD as a result of the attacks, and then the group that was also exposed but that did not suffer PTSD. And then they did blood tests. And very interestingly, they found that the people who presented with PTSD on average had significantly depleted CBD levels or cannabinoid levels in their blood, and the others didn't. Now, the others weren't taking supplemental CBD. So some people's bodies are producing enough cannabinoids, and others are not. So it's really about stress and how much stress you're exposed to and what you do to counterbalance that stress. So if you meditate daily, then you don't need as much CBD, for example. So there are other ways that you can counterbalance your stress than CBD.
Thank you. Well, when we talk about stress, what we're talking about is stress's effect on the body is an inflammatory response. So, how has CBD oil been shown to help with inflammation?
So I think about inflammation as a ringing bell, right? So something something will happen, like your body will encounter some food molecule, and if your immune system is stressed out, it's not behaving properly, it's trembling with fear in a way, right? You've got this nervous immune system. So then what your and the inflammatory system is part of the greater system. So your immune system, your inflammatory system are part of a super system. And so you take you eat some vegetable and it has some molecule in it, and because your immune system is malfunctioning, it freaks out and does a false alarm.
Yeah.
That is, it sees this molecule and says, "Oh my God, danger, danger!" But it's not. It's just it's acting screwy. It's malfunctioning, and then the inflammatory response starts, and the person starts getting a breakout on their skin from an inflammatory hyperactive response. Mm-hmm. So CBD then can make people who are hyperallergenic, that is, their hyper responses to molecules that are not necessarily harmful if they have a balanced system. So the inflammatory response is like this loop, a feedback loop where the body keeps freaking out and feeding on itself, and the inflammatory response just keeps cycling and can even upregulate, and you need to break that cycle. And CBD is so soothing and calming to the system that it helps to break the cycle, and that ringing bell just subsides.
So, and that has profound effects, because you could be talking about heart disease, you could be talking about asthma, you could certainly be talking about diabetes. The list goes on and on and on. As I think Time Magazine may have said around 2000, inflammation is the disease of the millennium.
Right, right. And that's one of the reasons that CBD seems to treat 20,000+ disease conditions, is because it's acting at a higher level. It's acting on things like calming the inflammatory freak out, right? The overreaction. Like, you should have inflammation when you need to have inflammation. Mm-hmm. And so you want to get your inflammatory response to be normal, to not have false alarms and overreact. And so if you treat that overreaction in the inflammatory system, then you can indirectly treat a myriad of other diseases.
I'm having this vision. I don't know what, the candle and oil, and maybe it's from Ayurveda, but I'm seeing just oil spilling over things and having just this calming sensation on everything. And that really,
yeah.
that the systems, all the systems will come back into balance if we can calm them. And that
That's
CBD
right.
oil may help with that.
Exactly. And then start doing other practices like some breath work, and maybe reading some inspiring literature instead of, watching reality TV. Just play around with it, and you'll find that little by little, increasing your mindfulness activities and your health activities, exercise and diet and mindfulness practices, that then you can navigate through a stressful world and live in New York City and not need as much CBD.
A few more questions and we'll begin to wind things down. This has been brilliant. I can't thank you enough. Do we need organic CBD, or are there chemicals and things that we want to watch out for when we're choosing an oil?
Yeah, so it's a funny thing that's going on. So the way the FDA protects us, or tries to protect us, is they'll look at science that takes a chemical, and you give a chemical to a rabbit or a human, and you study and you keep pushing the quantity of that chemical until they start having a bad reaction, right?
Yeah.
And if they don't have a bad reaction at some quantity, then the FDA says, okay, well, that quantity is fine. But the problem is that every quantity of a poison, like a poison that kills plants, a pesticide that they put on our produce, or that's an herbicide, right? So a pesticide that kills insects or that kills weeds, herbicides and pesticides, and then preservatives. So the problem is, if you count the quantity of these poisonous chemicals, that is, they're all poisonous at certain quantities.
Yeah.
And when they study it, they're studying just one in isolation and saying, well, this, the animal, didn't die or get problems at that level. But a human is consuming hundreds and hundreds of different known carcinogens and other dangerous chemicals that are known to be dangerous at higher levels. But we add them all up and we consume them. And no study has ever been done on the cumulative or systematic synergy between many, many of these noxious chemicals. And so the smarter, more conservative behavior would be to say, well, we can understand that it's kind of impossible for scientists to study all of them. How would you possibly do that?
Yeah.
Right? And so because we can't know that, to me, if it's poison, like strychnine, I prefer not to take strychnine in any quantity, even if there's a quantity that doesn't kill me, right? And so same thing, I'll pay a little more for my produce and just go for it. I'll just pay more for it, like I'm a European who puts more value in their food. I mean, Americans are weird. We like 3 tacos for 99 cents. That sounds suspicious to me, right? 3 tacos for $1, right? So we're into this mentality of getting things as cheap as possible. And the truth is, it's a little more expensive to grow foods without poison, without herbicides and pesticides and preservatives. But spend a little more on your food, play it safe, and you're probably in the long run will find out that science will later validate that you played it safe for the right, that you were smart.
And that would go with your CBD oil too, I would take it.
Oh yeah, same thing. I'm saying that I don't think that that you should have dangerous chemicals in the growing of your cannabis.
So I've got here an organic. I'm not sponsored by anybody, but I've got here an organic hemp CBD hemp oil right here, which is like $65, $70 for this little thing of, what is it, 250 micrograms. And what is your mission today? Because this is not very available to the general public.
Yeah, it's funny. I own my company, so I can manipulate my company and use it as a vehicle for social good and philanthropy, right? If I had a lot of shareholders, I might not be able to get away with that. So because I spent the last 10 years of my life not trying to make money, but to do social good through the science we talked about, when I started pushing 2 years ago to organize my company to come out with 110 CBD products in foods, beverages, and soft gels and oils and balms, I got sad because I saw that the people suffering with some of the worst stress, like the people suffering from the opioid epidemic, they're lower income people, right? They're in the bottom 20% of income earners. And that's the group in our society, the 60 million of us that currently have no access to CBD because their insurance won't pay for it. And I told you I take 40 milligrams a day, which is not a high amount. So that would take somebody about $200 a month for any typical product.
How many droppers, out of curiosity, how much is in a dropper? And so how many droppers worth do you take a day?
I can't answer it because the products are diluted with a carrier oil by
Yeah.
necessity, and different companies dilute it to different levels. And so they have different directions for different numbers of dropperfuls to get the same milligrams. But what I can say is that I'll give you an example. So
Thank
there's
you.
a company called CB Sciences that's pretty popular, and they have an average price for CBD. And their their product that is 60 soft gels,
Hmm.
and each soft gel contains 15 milligrams of CBD.
Okay.
So that's 15 times 60 is 900 milligrams of CBD. And so that costs about $100, $90. And that's the average price. And so I don't like that because you need two of those bottles a month. And if you're maybe a receptionist at some company, you got some credit card debt, you can't afford that extra $200. So you're out of luck. So we would sell the same bottle that they would sell for about almost $100. We'd sell that for $28. So we just take a lower profit margin because part of, well, the biggest, well, 100% of the reason why I'm doing this is not just to make more money. It's to it's to get it. I feel like our nation is on the brink. That's why I put the subtitle of our book, "Sick, Stressed, and All Effed Up: Is CBD the Cure?" Because I feel passionate about how dangerous and precarious our state is. We could go over the edge quite quickly. You get a little bit more of this right wing fear and demism. You could have some kind of semi societal collapse. I'm not talking about like Mad Max,
Right.
but you could have a semi societal collapse that could get really ugly. And it's this general fear and nervousness at a physical and mental level. So I kind of looked at it as an emergency. And I told the folks at my company who work for me, I said, guys, we got to do this as like a mission, like a Blues Brothers mission from God. You know, we got
I
to
love
we got
it.
to got to get it out there. So our price currently is 50% the price of the very lowest competitor that we've found in the market, and 1/3 the price of the average uh, competitor. And everybody will be coming down. So we won't be special for long, but everybody will come down uh, in the next couple years. But for right now, we wanted to come down early, and we just take a hit on our profit margin, which is fine with me, because people need this, and it's important.
If we think, and thank you, thank you, thank you, if we think of the nation as a being, as a person, they are sick, they are inflamed. This person of the US and of many other countries, but certainly this person of the US needs something, needs a CBD to calm the F down right now.
Absolutely. The collective consciousness that informs the collective socio-political conversations in our memes, our news networks, political conversations. This collective body is a nervous, fearful, and scared collective mind, the collective American mind. And CBD, if it can become as ubiquitously used as caffeine, for example, can perhaps help us avoid a tipping scale event, right? Where it goes to hell in a handbasket real quick. We can avoid that and get away from the precipice of the cliff.
I want to help in any way I can. Where can people go to find out more, to find out anything that you want to share with people?
Um, well, the book Pain Nation is a nice place to start. That's on Amazon.
Mhm.
And there's a film coming out that a production company made, and that's called Pain Nation, and that'll come out in a couple months. And there's just lots of good literature. If you Google CBD, you'll get all kinds of easy stuff to read. And you can go to YouTube and you'll see testimonials of people who are using it. And then you can try it. Go to a health food store, buy some, try it, and play around with it. You know, there's no LD50. That means you can't overdose from it. Your body already makes these cannabinoids, but try it like you're trying it and experiment.
And is there a website that you want to send people to?
Well, I really didn't want to come on your show and plug my products. People can try to, I'm sure they can try to look us up, but I really just want to make this not about money. Um, you know,
Thank you. Thank you. Any last words of wisdom that you want to share with people, Clay?
um, I would say that be careful of fear. Be careful of what you think, because the physics that we've been working on for 10 years on the connection between consciousness and fundamental quantum mechanics is beginning to strongly imply that when you fear something or worry about something, you start adjusting the quantum mechanics statistics. That is, you subtly increase the probability that a network of events will unfold to manifest that which you are worrying about and fearful of. So it's better to just be the observer and not cast too much judgment. When something messed up or bad happens, if you want to put that label on it, go ahead, put the label on it. But be a little bit more like a duck in water. A bad thing happens, some water flowed over. Oh, that was messed up. Somebody keyed my car at the Ralph's supermarket parking lot. That sucks. And then just let it pass through you. Like, don't get yourself worked up into a tizzy. Don't start getting a nasty belief system of fear and anger, because it's going to change the trajectory of your life in what might turn out to be a quantum mechanical physical way. So positive thinking, I believe, is perhaps more powerful than what we knew in the old physics paradigm. CBD helps you actually think more positively. That's one of the things most people say when they take CBD. They kind of cope and flow better, because you're always going to fail as you practice. You're going to have the good and the bad, right? You're never going to have a life with just, perfectness. So flow with it.
Woohoo! And you talk a lot in the book about PTSD and how it helps returning soldiers, for instance, as well. A last question, because my wife, she's the producer of the show. She wants me to ask any words of wisdom or advice for kids today, CBD or non-CBD. We're fascinating by what you're doing with your kids in meditation.
Well, CBD can help children. There's not been a lot of medical studies other than the children that have had epileptic diseases that other pharmaceuticals, were not treating. So some people have done some studies on epilepsy, but I worry about people giving kids amphetamines like Adderall or Ritalin. I mean, to give an amphetamine to a 10-year-old boy, something sounds worrisome about that. And if you're going to go so far as to give an amphetamine to a kid, maybe do research and look at testimonials online. You're not going to see the clinical studies, but you can look at testimonial after testimonial on YouTube videos and see how parents and some clinicians, doctors, are giving CBD to children who have ADD, right? And same thing with depression. In other words, teenagers are really suffering from depression. It's an epidemic.
Suicide's at an all-time high for teenagers.
Right? So I think that CBD is a way, way more conservative and safe alternative than the pharmaceuticals. And the ironic thing is the pharmaceuticals have been blessed by the government and they've had clinical studies. But the labels say on these drugs, on many of the drugs, it say may cause homicidal and suicidal tendencies. Literally, there are pharmaceuticals that legally disclaim that. That means you're giving somebody a drug and they're increasing the probability that they'll kill people in society. So drugs are already taking risk because the thanks to the clinical studies, the danger and the reasons not to take it are written right there on the legal disclaimers, on the prescription, on the label. So yeah, maybe you're going to think that there's some risk that you're taking CBD for something, and there hasn't been enough or even any clinical studies on certain disease conditions. But then you're going to take a risk, and you're going to say, well, I pretty much know that now that the body is producing cannabinoids, I know that it's known from clinical studies that there's no LD50 or lethal dose for this plant molecule. And then you experiment. It goes back to the old traditional way of people playing with herbs and plant medicines historically, and then seeing what works. And then that becomes a body of knowledge. It's just been outside of the money industry of big pharma. It's a different way.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been a phenomenal interview, Klee. We could certainly go on and on and on. Got to let you go, but thank you so much. Love the work you're doing and love the mission that you're on.
Thank you, Michael.
So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get Pain Nation, and begin your own CBD quest for greater health today, and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so much, Klee.
Thank you. That was fun.
That was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. And I think we did some good here today. I think we did some real good.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for setting it all up.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!